reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus went into the region of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." Jesus said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter said in reply, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus said to him in reply, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And he strictly ordered his disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You are Peter. You are a rock. Rock? Really? Peter? A rock? Seems to me more like a swamp. Wasn't it Peter, who we heard in the gospel a couple of weeks ago, was walking on water and got afraid and doubted and started sinking into the water? Wasn't it Peter who was with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus begged him to stay up and pray with him and he falls asleep? Wasn't it Peter who said, "I will be with you, Lord, through this whole ordeal"? And as soon as he was arrested, he fled. Wasn't it Peter who even denied that he even knew Jesus 3 times? Rock? Really? That's the neat thing about God, I think, is that he takes flawed people like Peter, like you and me, and he lets the graces and blessings flow. And he, as flawed as we are, we try to do our best in accomplishing the mission of God. Let me tell you a story that hopefully will bring that point home. We go back to 1931, Christmas Eve, Mesa, Arizona. An elderly couple gets in their old pickup truck and they head out to their kids' and grandkids' house, which is about an hour and a half drive from Mesa. And about 40 miles outside of Mesa, the truck breaks down. The husband gets out, pops the hood, looks at it, sees the problem, and says, "It's a fuel line. I can fix this. It's just going to take a while. We're going to be late." Remember, no cell phones or anything in the 1930s. All right, and so the wife is a little bored, just waiting, so she starts walking around. She walks off the side of the road into the desert a little bit, and she comes across a really strange sight. Underneath the tumbleweed, the sagebrush, she saw this beautiful decorative hat box. Remember back then, like the 20s and 30s, like women would have these big fancy hats, and they came in nice fancy hat boxes. And so she saw this hat box there with like the lid kind of half on and half off. She's thinking, "I'm not going to go near that. Might be a scorpion in there. Might be a snake." She calls her husband. So he goes over. He uses his cowboy boot and kicks it off the lid, and they hear a noise. The wife gets scared. The husband looks in. Couldn't believe it. A beautiful baby. Bright red hair, blue beady eyes. Left there in a hat box. So the man finishes up the fuel line, gets that fixed, and they give up their Christmas Eve because now they have a baby on their hands. And they drove all the way back to Mesa, went to the sheriff's office, dropped off. The sheriff was actually there. He gave all his deputies off because it was Christmas Eve, so the sheriff was in there, and he gets this baby, which is now dubbed the Hatbox Baby. Word gets out. It gets on the news, it gets on the radio, and the newspapers and everything. Hatbox Baby found in desert. And then after a couple months, after a couple days, the sheriff actually watched the baby the first 2 nights, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, because everything was closed. And then he gets to an orphanage the day after Christmas, and the orphanage takes this hatbox baby. And a couple months later, we're talking about the end of February now, 1932. This is during the Great Depression. All right, a judge is going to award this hatbox baby to a family. Guess what? The people in Mesa were so enamored with this baby coming on Christmas Eve. Over 200 families registered to adopt that child. How's the judge going to decide that? Well, it just so happened the night before the judge was going to make that decision, and all these 200 families were going to come into the courthouse, there was a huge storm, a real gully washer. In fact, it even washed out the bridge leading into Mesa. And so when the judge was there at 10 o'clock ready to decide, instead of 200 families, there were 2. Only 2 made it. One family had a previously adopted child, so they're looking for like a little sister for their family. And the other family was just this husband and wife. They were unable to have kids, and they were just hoping and praying and praying and praying that they would get this hatbox baby. And the judge gave it to them. So they become a little family. A family filled with compassion, love, support, kindness, dreams, inspiration. It's been great. The hatbox baby grows up. She gets older. She falls in love. She marries. She has kids. Her kids grow up. She gets divorced. She's living in California. So now we're fast forwarding maybe 50, 55 years. It's about 1985 now. All right? And the hatbox baby's mom calls her up one day and says, "Honey, I need to talk to you." And she could tell, the daughter could tell that mom didn't sound good and sounded sick. So she said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, I can't tell you on the phone. You have to come here." So she takes a few days off of work and travels back to Mesa. And then mother and daughter have this conversation. "Honey, let me start by this, give you this folder." It was a brown envelope filled with newspaper clippings about the hatbox baby. She saved them all these years. And the daughter was reading these and said, "What's this have to do with me?" She said, "Honey, you're the hatbox baby." "I am? You mean I'm adopted? Why didn't you tell me? Why shouldn't I have known this? Mom, I don't understand." He said, "Well, it was a different time and different place when we got you, and we didn't know the right time, and we went back and forth, and then your dad died, and here I am, and I don't have much time left." And she was right. She died 8 weeks later after this conversation, her mom. And so I thought you should know before I go. And I just want to let you know, honey, that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I had miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage. I was never able to have a child, a baby, and I always wanted to have one. You are an answer to my prayers. You are the best blessing in my life. They had a great conversation. Tears, hugs, joy. And then, like I said, 8 weeks later, she was gone. And so, this hatbox baby, now in her 50s, has all these questions start rising through, especially after mom died. What happened to my birth mom? Why did she do that? Why was I abandoned in the desert? She was filled with questions, and so she did some digging, and she looked at all the newspaper articles, again, and she saw the names, and she looked up all the names, and every single one of those names in there had already died, except for one, with one person left, the sheriff. Joe B. Meyer was his name, M-E-I-E-R. And so she looks in the phone book and sees his name, calls him up and says, were you the former sheriff? He says, "Yes, I was." This guy's like 90 years old now, the sheriff at the time. And she said, "Well, I'm the hatbox baby." And you heard silence on the sheriff's end of the phone. He said, "Really? I always wondered what happened to you." And she said, "Can I come over? I have a lot of questions." The sheriff said, "Sure." So she goes over there, and they have this nice conversation, and the sheriff starts off by saying, "When that couple brought you into my office on Christmas Eve, You were like a Christmas gift to the whole town. You know, everybody, when word got out on Christmas Day, people were bringing you blankets and diapers and shoes, and if someone even brought you a ring, and someone brought you an amulet. You had so many presents. You were the Christmas gift to the whole town. That made her feel pretty good. But then she said, but why was I just left out in the desert to die? And the sheriff said, oh, no, you weren't. No way. That's not true. When you arrived on my desk, you were cleaned, you smelled like soap, you had clean clothes on, you had a brand new blanket, you were soft, you were warm, you were taken care of, you were meant to be found. This wave of peace rushes over her like a peace that she's never experienced before. She gets some answers to her questions. Now here's the thing. You may say, what does this have to do with the gospel? Here it is. You have 3 flawed women in this story. All right, just like Peter. All right? You have a baby who's unwanted, unappreciated. You have a birth mom who's struggling to cope with the situation of being a mom. You have another woman who has all her life has prayed to have a baby and never could, and now becomes a mom. All 3 women have their flaws, their shortcomings, just like Peter, and they all experienced the grace of God. And you and I, you know, we're flawed just like Peter is. We're flawed. A lot of times we can identify with that baby being left in the desert, being unwanted, maybe unappreciated. Or we may feel like we are the birth mother, just we can't cope with what's going on around us and we give up. Or we can be like we may identify like with the adoptive mother because, you know, she just had that question throughout her life, why is this happening to me? Why does this happen? Why can't I have kids? And we may have that same question when we get sick or we have tragedies or troubles that happen in our families. Why me? Why is this happening to me? We can identify it. You know, we are with them in that lonely desert of doubt, confusion, and loss. We're there. And sure, we ask why. And we worry, and we worry. You know, I think, what does worrying do? Just raise our blood pressure, right? Doesn't do much good. So what do? The only thing I can think of, the only proper response is to just humbly accept the keys to the kingdom, like Peter did. Humbly accept those keys to the kingdom and open wide the gates, open wide the doors of blessing and grace. Share that grace, share that blessing with those around you. We're all in that lonely desert. And it's the keys of the kingdom that can just pour forth. If we open it up, we just have to open it up. Grace, blessings can be ours and to those we serve. Amen.